Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. Why do you suffer? Not in the general, vague sense of life is hard or people are cruel. I mean, really, why do you allow yourself to be disturbed by what someone else thinks, says, or does? This is the question you've avoided, not because you don't know the answer, but because the answer forces you to take back power you've been unconsciously giving away. You see, the secret isn't to change people. It isn't to fix the world or control every outcome or guard yourself endlessly. The real power, the unshakable peace, comes when nothing and no one has permission to disturb your stillness. This isn't about apathy. It's about liberation. And once you understand it, once you feel it, you will never again allow the chaos of others to become the cage of your mind. True freedom begins when external chaos no longer disturbs your inner peace. That is not a poetic idea. It is a fundamental truth of conscious living. Most people spend their lives reacting to the world around them, constantly pulled by the opinions of others, tossed by the tides of news, relationships, disappointments, expectations, and sudden change. Their peace is conditional, fragile. It depends on whether others approve of them, whether today's events align with their desires, whether the outer world behaves according to their personal script. But freedom, real freedom, is not achieved by fixing or controlling the outside world. That pursuit is endless and exhausting. Real freedom is when you stop giving your inner peace away to things and people outside of you. It is when your sense of self, your calm, your clarity, your joy are no longer hostages to external validation, chaos, or comfort. Ask yourself, how many times have you allowed your mood to be hijacked by someone else's words? How often have you let an unpredictable event ruin your entire day, your entire focus, or your entire sense of worth? The truth is, it isn't the chaos that disturbs you. It's your attachment to needing that chaos to resolve in a way that comforts you. But life, by its very nature, is uncertain. People will misunderstand you. Circumstances will change without notice. Not everyone will treat you kindly, and not every moment will go as planned. The question is not whether the storm comes. The question is whether you let it enter your mind and define your reality. There is a space within you that is completely untouched by the noise of the world. Most never reach it, not because it is hidden, but because they are distracted. That stillness, that internal silence, doesn't react to insults or compliments. It doesn't flinch when plans fall apart. It doesn't chase validation or run from rejection. It simply observes calmly and fully what is. And in that observation, it remains free. Freedom is not about building walls to keep pain out. It's about recognizing that your peace isn't built from anything external in the first place. It's remembering that someone else's opinion of you is none of your business, that your reaction to things is what shapes your experience, not the things themselves. What does that look like in real life? It looks like hearing criticism without it becoming your identity. It looks like being alone without feeling incomplete. It looks like failing at something and realizing it doesn't make you a failure. It looks like being present, not resisting what is, not longing for what was, and not anxiously gripping what might come. Most people try to construct peace by organizing their external life perfectly. The right relationship, the right job, the right responses from others. But even if you arrange the perfect setup, it remains a house of cards because it relies on something you can't control. One wrong word, one lost opportunity, and it collapses. That's not peace. That's dependency. Real peace is when nothing has to happen for you to be at ease. Real freedom is when you can be still in the storm, not because you've numbed yourself to feeling, but because you've realized that reacting is a choice. You begin to realize people aren't really hurting you, they're revealing where you are still hurt. Situations aren't breaking you, they're exposing where you are still brittle. You start seeing every trigger as a teacher, every difficult moment as an invitation to step back, to breathe, to no longer hand over your emotional well-being to something or someone that lives outside of your control. Do not misunderstand this. This is not about ignoring reality. It's not about pretending things don't hurt. It's about reclaiming the power to decide what you dwell in. You feel the emotion, you witness the reaction, but you no longer become it. A person may insult you, but you are not their insult. A door may close, but you are not that closed opportunity. A storm may come, but you are not the rain. You are the sky it falls through. When you understand this, truly understand this, your freedom is no longer conceptual. It becomes embodied. You walk differently, you listen differently, you speak with presence, you stop chasing, you stop clinging, you stop bracing yourself against the world, and instead move through it like a silent warrior. No one can afflict you anymore. Not because you've hardened yourself, but because you've awakened to who you really are underneath all the noise. This is not about becoming indifferent. It's about becoming independent of the need for constant emotional rescue. You learn to sit with discomfort. You learn to release the need to be right. You let go of controlling outcomes. And in doing so, you return to something far deeper than comfort. You return to truth. And the truth is, freedom has always been here, waiting in the stillness beneath your reactions, waiting in the breath before your next complaint, waiting in the silence behind your need to defend yourself. You don't need to escape life to be free. You just need to stop letting life decide how you feel. Sit with this. True freedom begins not when the world changes, but when you no longer need it to. And from that moment on, nothing and no one can afflict you anymore. Most suffering isn't from what happens to you, but from how you cling to it. There's a quiet truth most people never realize. The pain we carry isn't always from the moment it began. It's from the way we refuse to let it end. A word spoken in anger, a betrayal, a failure, a loss. Yes, these moments hurt, but the moment passes. What doesn't pass is the echo we keep alive in our minds. We replay it, analyze it, and attach our identity to it. We turn it into a story and then live inside that story like it's still happening. You see, the event itself is often brief. A sentence takes seconds to say. A breakup may take minutes. A rejection happens in a moment. But we can suffer over it for days, months, even years, not because the pain is still fresh, but because we refuse to stop feeding it with thought. Clinging is subtle. It disguises itself as reflection. You tell yourself you're thinking it through, gaining closure, seeking understanding. But what you're often doing is building a shrine to your pain. You worship it with attention. You keep returning to it as if it holds your value, your identity, your sense of self. You don't even realize how much of your life is shaped not by the events themselves, but by your attachment to how things should have gone instead. You become stuck in mental loops. I should have known better. They shouldn't have treated me like that. If only I had done something differently. These are the chains you forge in your own mind. They don't protect you, they trap you. Freedom begins when you understand that your thoughts about the past are not the past itself. Your interpretations are not the truth. And most importantly, your suffering is optional. Let that sink in. Pain is often inevitable, but suffering is not. Suffering is what happens when you hold on to pain long after life has moved on. It's when you carry the wound into places it doesn't belong, new relationships, new experiences, future dreams. We're taught to analyze pain to extract meaning from it. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not analyze it, but release it. You don't need to understand every detail. You just need to recognize that your peace is more valuable than your need to be right, your need for revenge, your need for closure. Letting go is not weakness, it's wisdom. Many fear letting go because they confuse it with forgetting, but letting go doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means no longer allowing what happened to define who you are today. You remember the lesson, but you don't carry the wound. You remember the facts, but you stop assigning yourself as the victim inside the narrative. You begin to see no person, no experience, no loss has the power to define your worth unless you hand that power over. And that's what clinging does. It hands your present moment over to the past. It ties your current peace to something that no longer exists. You become a prisoner of something that's only alive in memory. Imagine holding a burning coal. It hurts, right? But the coal doesn't continue to burn you unless you refuse to drop it. That's clinging. You keep your grip even when it scorches you. Not because you want to suffer, but because you believe letting go means surrendering your story, maybe even surrendering your sense of justice. But in truth, letting go isn't about giving anything up. It's about reclaiming your space, your energy, your power. You can still care, you can still feel, but you don't have to suffer. And the moment you realize this, everything changes. You stop arguing with reality. You stop needing others to validate your pain before you heal. You stop carrying the emotional weight of a moment that's already passed. What would happen if you stopped clinging? What would happen if you allowed things to be as they are without dragging them through the mud of your expectations? You would find lightness. Not the lightness of denial, but the lightness of release. A clear space in your mind, a softness in your heart. a freedom in your breath. This isn't a practice of force. You don't let go by pushing thoughts away. You let go by no longer feeding them. You notice them, you acknowledge them, and then, without judgment, you return to presence. Again and again, until presence becomes your natural state and the noise of clinging fades into the background. And one day, without effort, you realize you are no longer haunted by what was. You are no longer tortured by what could have been. You are here, alive, whole, unshaken. Not because your past disappeared, but because you stopped building your future around it. This is the power of not clinging. This is the beginning of true peace. You are not your thoughts, your triggers, or your pain. You are the awareness beneath it all. This might be the most liberating truth you'll ever come to understand. Most people live their entire lives assuming they are whatever passes through their minds. A negative thought arises, I must be a negative person. A memory of pain resurfaces, I'm still broken. A feeling of anger flashes, I'm angry. But these are simply appearances, passing waves in the ocean of your awareness. They are not you. You are the one who sees them. You are the one who observes the thought, the feeling, the reaction. You are the silent witness behind the noise. And until you recognize this, you'll remain tangled in the illusion that every experience that flows through you defines who you are. Imagine watching clouds move through the sky. The sky doesn't become the cloud. It simply holds space for it to pass. Your awareness is that sky. Your thoughts, emotions, and pain, they are the weather. They come and go, they shift, they change. But you, the one who sees them, are untouched. You've been taught to identify with every thought you have. You've been conditioned to believe that every reaction must be justified, that every emotion must be chased down, explained, and owned. But this creates a false self. A self that is constantly fluctuating, one moment confident and the next moment insecure, one moment peaceful and the next panicked. This false self lives in reaction. It is built on the stories your mind tells you. It says, because I feel this, it must be true. But truth is not dependent on emotion. Feelings are real, but they aren't always rooted in reality. They are signals, not facts. They are to be felt and released, not owned and stored. Let's take triggers, for example. Something happens, someone says something, and you feel yourself explode internally. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's shame, maybe it's sadness. And instantly your mind rushes in to justify the reaction. They're wrong. I'm not good enough. This always happens to me. But what if you paused instead of reacting? What if you became curious? In that pause, you would see something incredible. You are not the trigger. You are the one noticing the trigger. You are not the emotion. You are the space it rises within. And in that space, you are free. In that space, you are powerful. Because once you know you are not the thought, you're no longer at its mercy. Even pain, as intense as it is, does not define you. Pain is something you experience, but it is not your identity. You are not the heartbreak. You are not the trauma. You are not the story of what went wrong. You are the consciousness that experienced it, the presence that endured it, and the awareness that is still here, watching it all unfold. This is not detachment in the cold sense of the word. This is deeper intimacy with yourself, to truly meet yourself beyond the surface noise, to see, maybe for the first time, that there is a you that does not shift with your moods. There is a you that is still silent and spacious. A you that doesn't panic when thoughts come. A you that doesn't collapse under emotion. A you that observes without judgment. And the more you connect with this deeper awareness, the less the world can control you. You begin to experience life without being pulled apart by it. You can feel anger without becoming it. You can move through sadness without sinking into it. You can even witness fear without letting it direct your choices. This shift from identification to observation is the beginning of true peace. It's the end of being pushed around by your own mind. It's the end of being hijacked by emotions that are meant to pass, not stay. When you sit as the observer, you are no longer tossed by every internal wave. You are anchored. And from this place, you begin to respond instead of react. You begin to choose instead of repeat patterns. You begin to live, not from fear or habit, but from clarity. You begin to see that thoughts don't need to be believed. Triggers don't need to be acted upon. Pain doesn't need to be carried forever. Everything is a visitor. And you are the home it passes through. The next time your mind tells you who you are based on how you feel, take a breath. Step back. Notice the thought, notice the feeling, notice the story, and then remember, you are not this. You are the one who sees it. That seeing is your freedom. That space is your power. That awareness is your true self. And when you know this deeply and fully, nothing can truly disturb you again. Not because life stops being difficult, but because you stop confusing the waves with the ocean. Attachment to people's opinions is the leash that keeps your spirit caged. There is an invisible thread that runs through much of your suffering, a quiet, persistent desire to be seen a certain way, to be liked, to be accepted, to be validated. And this desire, although deeply human, becomes a prison the moment it governs your actions, your thoughts, and your self-worth. We are taught early to look outside ourselves for approval. A kind word feels like nourishment. A disapproving glance feels like rejection. Over time, we begin to shape ourselves not around truth, but around perception. We adjust our behavior so others don't disapprove. We silence our opinions to avoid confrontation. We dim our light so we don't outshine. We contort ourselves into smaller and smaller versions just to stay acceptable. And slowly, without noticing, we lose our connection to who we truly are. This is the leash. The moment you tie your piece to what others think of you, you hand over the keys to your own inner freedom. You start living not for your growth, but for their comfort. Not for your truth, but for their approval. You become a mirror, constantly reflecting what others want to see, never showing your real self. But here's what no one tells you. People's opinions are theirs, built from their fears, their beliefs, their limitations. When someone disapproves of you, it often says more about their world than yours. They may judge you because your courage threatens their comfort. They may mock your dreams because they gave up on theirs. They may criticize you not because you're wrong, but because you're different. You allow these passing opinions to shape you. You shrink when you're judged. You freeze when you're misunderstood. Carry the weight of someone else's narrative as if it were your own. This is the cage. When your soul knows who you are, but your mind keeps asking others for permission to be it. What if you stopped? What if you decided that the only approval you need is your own? What if you gave yourself full permission to exist as you are without editing yourself for someone else's comfort? The moment you stop chasing validation, you begin to taste freedom. The moment you stop fearing rejection, you begin to act from truth. This doesn't mean you become insensitive or arrogant. It means you become rooted, grounded in who you are so that praise doesn't inflate you and criticism doesn't shrink you. You begin to listen, not to please, but to understand. You begin to speak, not to impress, but to express. You begin to live, not for image, but for alignment. People will always have opinions. Let them misunderstand, let them judge, let them disagree. Their mental projections don't define you unless you agree to carry them. It's not your job to fit into boxes you were never meant to occupy. It's not your responsibility to water yourself down to be digestible for every person you meet. You weren't born to blend in. You were born to unfold into your fullness, whether or not it makes others uncomfortable. And yes, it takes courage to be misunderstood. It takes strength to walk your own path while others question it. It takes deep self-respect to no longer seek permission to be what you already are. But the reward is priceless. You begin to experience peace that isn't fragile, confidence that isn't loud, power that isn't borrowed from the opinions of the crowd. You begin to move through life with a quiet knowing,
I don't need to be liked to be whole.
I don't need to be agreed with to be right. I don't need to be validated to feel valuable. This is not about isolation. It's about inner sovereignty. You can still love others deeply while not depending on their approval to love yourself. You can still be open to feedback while being immune to flattery or insult. When you untie yourself from the leash of public opinion, you don't become distant, you become authentic. And authenticity is magnetic. It draws the right people to you, not because you try to impress them, but because you had the courage to be real. How much of what you do, say, wear, or dream is shaped by invisible judgment? How much of your life is being dictated by the fear of what someone might think? Then ask yourself this: what would I do if no one were watching? What would I say if I didn't fear disapproval? Who would I become if I stopped editing myself? Because the moment you stop living for others, you begin truly living for yourself. And in that moment, the cage opens, the leash falls, and your spirit, long silenced, begins to soar. Detachment isn't disconnection, it's power without possession. There is a common misunderstanding about detachment. Many believe that to be detached is to be cold, emotionless, or distant. They imagine a person who withdraws from the world, who avoids love, avoids risk, avoids care, all in the name of spiritual calm. But this is not true detachment. That is avoidance. That is fear wearing the mask of wisdom. Real detachment is something entirely different. It is not the rejection of connection, it is the release of control. It is not the refusal to feel. It is the refusal to cling. Detachment means you can love fully, deeply, sincerely, without needing to possess the person or outcome. It means you can care without trying to control. You can give without needing to keep. You can show up without demanding guarantees. This is power, quiet, unshakable power. The kind of power that comes from knowing that nothing external can complete you, and nothing lost can truly take anything away from you. Possession, on the other hand, is fear in disguise. When we try to possess people, titles, results, or even emotions, we believe that our happiness and identity depend on holding on. We think, if I lose this, I lose a part of myself. So we grip tighter, we cling, we obsess, and in doing so, we suffocate the very life we're trying to protect. Relationships turn to resentment, ambitions turn to anxiety, dreams turn to cages. Because we didn't love, we tried to own. We didn't pursue, we clung. And what we cling to, we often destroy, not because we mean to, but because fear is louder than love when possession takes over. Detachment allows space for both others and ourselves. It says, I love you, but I don't need to chain you. It says, I have this goal, but I am not this goal. It says, I want this experience, but I trust life even if it doesn't arrive. It is the ability to walk through life open-handed, to hold things gently, to appreciate without addiction, to admire without grasping. You begin to realize that everything you experience is passing through you, not yours to keep, not yours to own, just yours to witness, to grow from, to let go when it's time. And no, this doesn't mean becoming indifferent. In fact, detachment deepens presence. It removes the noise of desperation. It silences the need to manipulate, impress, or control. What's left is a clean, sincere presence. A space where love can flow freely, where efforts can be made without fear, where emotions can arise and dissolve naturally. When you're detached, you don't lose interest, you gain clarity. You start showing up because it's true to you, not because you're addicted to results or terrified of loss. You can listen without needing to defend. You can give advice without needing it to be followed. You can walk away from situations that no longer serve you, not in bitterness, but in peace. This power, the power of non-possession, makes you whole within yourself. You no longer chase people to feel loved. You no longer need constant success to feel worthy. You no longer fear endings because you've stopped seeing them as failures. You understand they're part of the flow. A person who is truly detached can still cry. They can still feel heartbreak. They can still face disappointment. But the difference is they don't stay stuck there. They don't identify with the pain. They let it move through, just like joy, just like change, just like life itself. Detachment means your peace is no longer on lease to outside conditions. You stop being at the mercy of people's moods, praise, absence, or validation. You stop depending on circumstances to justify your inner stillness. You become the source of your own stability. And in that space, paradoxically, you become more compassionate, not less. Because now your love is no longer wrapped in expectation. Your giving is no longer tangled with strings. You can love others as they are without needing to mold them into your ideal. You can witness someone leaving not because you don't care, but because you trust yourself to remain whole even in their absence. This is what detachment offers, not a life of cold distance, but a life of deep presence without bondage. You begin to say, I am here fully, but I no longer need to own anything to be okay. I care, but I won't cling. I feel, but I don't drown. I act, but I'm not attached to how it unfolds. And that is the ultimate freedom. To be in the world, not as a beggar of peace, but as a creator of it. To participate in life with your heart open, but your hands ungrasping. To walk through life holding nothing, and in doing so, holding everything. No one can hurt you unless you allow their words or actions to enter your inner world. That might sound overly simplified, maybe even a little unrealistic. But pause, breathe, and really consider the truth of it. The world is full of voices, some kind, some cruel. Some informed, others blind and reactive. People will speak from their wounds, from their fears, from their projections, and they'll direct all of it at you, often without even realizing. They'll criticize, mock, blame, dismiss, and occasionally try to diminish your light simply because it unsettles their own darkness. But their words, no matter how loud, only hold power if you grant them entry. Think about it. How many insults or rejections have lived inside you far longer than the moment they were spoken? It wasn't the insult itself that had power. It was your agreement with it, your repeated rehearsing of it, your attachment to it. The actual event may have lasted seconds, but your identification with it continued for days, months, even years. And the pain didn't come from the words, it came from the meaning you assigned them. This is the trap, believing that others define you, that their judgments reflect your truth. But they don't. People don't see you as you are, they see you as they are. Their voice is filtered through their experience, their fears, their conditioning, their limitations. And when they speak, they're often speaking to their own reflection in you, not to your reality. So why carry it like it's gospel? Someone can call you a failure, but unless you take it in, it's just air passing through sound. Someone can mock your dreams, but unless you let those words plant themselves in your soil, they cannot grow roots in you. This is the core of emotional sovereignty, the understanding that you are the gatekeeper of your mind. Not every voice deserves entry. Not every comment deserves a home. Imagine your mind as a sacred space, a quiet, still sanctuary. The world will always knock on its doors, sometimes with praise, sometimes with poison, but you decide what enters. You decide what takes root. And when you begin to treat your inner world with this level of respect, you begin to realize that most of what used to hurt you wasn't an attack, it was an invitation. An invitation to believe something about yourself that was never true. To rise above this is not to become numb or emotionless, it's to become deeply aware, aware of what's yours and what's not. Aware of when your reaction is simply an old wound being poked. Aware of when your peace is being offered to someone who doesn't deserve it. This doesn't mean you become arrogant or self-righteous. It means you learn to observe before absorbing. You give yourself a moment between what is said and what you choose to believe. And in that moment lies your power. In that space, you begin to ask, is this true? Is this mine? Do I want to carry this? Most people have been programmed to react instantly, to defend, to internalize, to attack back. But reaction is slavery. It means you're not in control, your pain is. Your insecurities are, your past is. But when you understand that no one can truly hurt you without your inner permission, something shifts. You stop personalizing what isn't personal. You stop assuming everyone else's energy is about you. You begin to see hurt people hurt people. And most of the time, their pain is leaking out in the form of criticism, anger, or judgment. And so you stop absorbing. You stop responding to every jab. You stop needing to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop building your self-worth out of the bricks others throw at you. This is not about ego. It's about self-protection through self-awareness. It's about recognizing that your value is not a democracy. It's not voted on by others. It's rooted in your own knowing. You become like the ocean. Someone may throw a rock into your waters, but you don't flinch. You ripple, you absorb, and you return to stillness. Because you know what you are. You know your depth, and no surface disturbance can change that. We are human. We feel, and it's okay to hurt. It's okay to be affected. But the key is not to stay there, not to build a home in that pain. You feel it. You breathe through it. And then you let it go, not because the world is kind, but because you deserve peace more than you deserve to be right, wounded, or offended. Words are wind. They come and go. They carry stories, fears, and projections. But they are not truths until you adopt them. They are not weapons unless you let them pierce your heart. And they are not definitions unless you shrink yourself to fit them. Stand tall in your own awareness. Build a foundation so firm within yourself that no storm can shake you. Be kind, be open, but guard your inner world like something sacred, because it is. And the more you protect it, the more you'll realize the power to be unshaken was always yours. You've likely been taught that control is power, control over your environment, your relationships, your emotions. But let's challenge that idea. What if the truest form of freedom lies in surrendering control? Not tightening your grip on life, but loosening it. What if letting go is not weakness, but a deeper strength, one that liberates you from suffering? We live in a world obsessed with certainty. We want clear answers, predictable outcomes, and total mastery over every situation. But reality doesn't work that way. Life is fluid, unpredictable, and often out of our hands. The more we try to control people and outcomes, the more anxiety and disappointment we invite. Ironically, our obsession with control becomes the very cause of our affliction. People don't disturb us, their unpredictability does. Circumstances don't hurt us. Our resistance to what's happening does. What happens when you surrender? Not give up, but surrender. That means you no longer resist what is. You stop trying to bend the river of life to your will. You stop expecting people to behave the way you think they should. And in that surrender, you begin to experience a profound lightness. Letting go is not apathy, it's presence. You stop reacting to life and begin responding to it with clarity. You no longer carry the burden of trying to manage what was never yours to manage. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, not panicking, not yelling at the sky, but still calm, grounded. You can't stop the storm, but you can stop the storm from entering you. That's the power of surrender. Much of what causes pain isn't what's happening, but our desire for it to be different. You suffer because you wanted them to stay and they left. You suffer because you wanted them to stay and they left. You suffer because you wanted a certain result and it didn't arrive. But why should life conform to your expectations? Who told you it must? That's the illusion, the belief that things must align with your mental blueprint. And once you dissolve that belief, the chains fall off. When you let go of control, you open yourself to a deeper intelligence. Life has its rhythm, its timing. Some things fall apart because they must. Some people leave because the story is over. And no amount of clinging or wishing can rewrite what the universe is unfolding. In surrender, you begin to see the hidden wisdom in what you once resisted. What looked like a curse becomes a lesson. What felt like a loss becomes a liberation. This is not to say you become passive. Quite the opposite. When you stop trying to control everything, your actions become more powerful. Why? Because they are no longer coming from fear or desperation. You're no longer reacting, you're choosing. You engage life as it is, not as you demand it to be. That presence is a form of mastery. Surrender also dissolves ego. The ego thrives on control. It wants to dominate, to win, to always be right. But in surrender, the ego has nothing to hold on to. And when ego falls silent, you discover something extraordinary. Peace that does not depend on the world. Joy that is not linked to outcomes. Freedom that isn't waiting for someone else's permission. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care more deeply, but with detachment. You love without clinging. You give without expecting. You show up fully, but you release the need to possess. That's real love. That's real strength. And in that space, nothing and no one can afflict you anymore, because your peace is no longer tied to them. Every day, life will offer you 1,000 chances to practice this. Someone will speak to you with rudeness. Will you resist or observe? A plan will fall through. Will you panic or adapt? A loved one may disappoint you. Will you cling or let them be? In every one of these moments, you have a choice. Tighten your grip and suffer, or surrender and be free. Begin now. Watch yourself. Notice when you're trying to control the uncontrollable. Breathe, loosen your grip, let go. And as you do, you'll start to see life not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a flow to be danced with. You are not here to dominate reality, you are here to merge with it. And in that merging, nothing can disturb your peace, not because the world is perfect, but because you no longer demand it to be. Let go, not to fall, but to rise. You spend much of your life trying to bend the world to your expectations, trying to get people to like you, situations to unfold the way you prefer, and outcomes to mirror your ideals. But this effort, though persistent, is largely in vain. The very act of trying to control or fix the outer world is what leaves you wounded, disappointed, and constantly disturbed. The truth is unsettling yet liberating. Peace does not come from making the world perfect. It comes from stepping outside the illusion that it must be perfect at all. There is immense freedom when you stop depending on anything or anyone for your inner stability. You are not meant to tether your calmness to the ever-shifting moods of others or the unpredictable dance of circumstances. When you relinquish that need, when you cease trying to fix everything around you, the most surprising thing happens. Nothing has the power to disturb you anymore. Consider how often you react, not to events, but to your story about those events. Someone ignores you, and your mind spins a tale about disrespect, rejection, or betrayal. That story, crafted by your mind, is what hurts you, not the event itself. But what if you could drop the story? What if you no longer needed the world to validate your worth, or people to meet your unspoken emotional demands? The world becomes infinitely lighter when you stop taking things personally. You begin to see that people don't act at you. They act from themselves. Their moods, words, and behaviors are often reflections of their inner chaos, not accurate judgments about your being. And in seeing that, you liberate yourself. You realize that it was never your job to carry the emotional burden of how others think or act. This shift isn't passive. It's not numbness. It's clarity. It's a conscious choice to stop outsourcing your peace to things beyond your control. You're not becoming indifferent. You're becoming inwardly anchored. You can still care deeply, but now you're no longer easily shattered. You stop arguing with what is and instead move with grace, through the imperfections of life. And here's the deeper truth. Life was never meant to be free from discomfort. Pain, loss, failure, and disappointment, they're all woven into the fabric of existence. But suffering only arises when you resist them, when you try to avoid what must be felt or change what cannot be controlled. When you allow things to be as they are without grasping, without pushing, you create space for peace to bloom even in the midst of chaos. Nothing outside of you truly disturbs you. What disturbs you is your mind's insistence that reality should be otherwise. You create internal storms not because of what's happening, but because you say, this should not be happening. That inner resistance is the birthplace of misery. But the moment you let go, the moment you drop the narrative and surrender to what is, you stop being afflicted. Freedom comes not when the world aligns with your desires, but when your well-being is no longer dependent on that alignment. That is when you become untouchable, not by building walls, but by dissolving your inner need to control. You stop expecting certainty from an uncertain world, and in doing so, you reclaim your power. People may come and go. Their opinions may rise and fall like waves. Situations may change, storms may pass through. But your inner sky remains untouched. You are not the weather, you are the vast space in which it all unfolds. You learn to watch the chaos without becoming it. You observe the pain without becoming a victim of it. You allow everything to be, and in that allowing, you transcend it. This way of living is not a withdrawal, it's a return to the only place peace has ever truly existed, within. And when you stop being disturbed by others, by events, by failure, or by praise, you finally taste the flavor of real freedom. Not the freedom of getting what you want, but the freedom of no longer needing to. In this state, you don't become detached in the cold sense. Rather, you become warmly available to life, not to manipulate it, but to experience it. You start living fully because you're no longer afraid of being hurt. You stop tiptoeing around others' judgments. You stop living in reaction and start living in presence. And the irony is, the moment you stop needing others to treat you a certain way in order to feel whole, you begin to attract deeper, more genuine relationships. Why? Because you no longer engage from desperation, fear, or pretense. You're no longer performing to be accepted. You are simply being. This is the heart of invincibility, not being immune to pain, but being unaffected by the illusion that pain is wrong. When you understand this, nothing and no one can afflict you anymore, not because the world has changed, but because you have. When you finally arrive at the stillness beneath all the noise, you begin to see the truth. Nothing outside of you ever truly had power over you. The world may roar, people may disappoint, circumstances may collapse, but what remains is your unshakable presence, untouched by chaos, undisturbed by opinion. You only need to understand that what afflicts you is not what happens, but your identification with it. You are not your pain, your failures, or the labels others assign to you. You are the awareness in which all those things come and go. Once you recognize this, you stop seeking validation and vengeance, and instead rest in a quiet power that no one can touch. You realize that forgiveness is not for them, but for your own liberation. Detachment is not indifference, it is clarity. And peace is not something you chase, it is something you uncover once the illusions fall away. So let people be as they are. Let the world do what it does. You are not here to control, you are here to awaken. And in that awakening, nothing and no one can afflict you anymore, because the only prison was the one you unknowingly built in your own mind, and now you hold the key. Be still, be aware, be free.